Hello and welcome to Rolling with Two. I'm Will, and with me is the wind beneath my wings,
Sarah.
And today we're looking at a two-player perspective and accessibility for Wingspan. Sarah, tell us a little bit about this game.
All right, Wingspan is an engine and tableau building board game of attracting birds to habitats. So Will, how do the rules change for two?
They do not change. In fact, there is no banana bird bot, so no bot to work around. It's a player account neutral rule set. In fact, the only time you actually do have to change anything is if you're playing solo. But we're talking about two players here, so no rule changes.
Fantastic. So let's talk about what issues two players might encounter.
So the deck is rather large. We have 171 bird cards. And as such, with only a two-player game, you're only going to see a small fraction. We calculated about 18% of the cards we saw in our play. So that does mean that if there are certain combos you want to see or are expecting to see certain things happen in the game, well, you just won't. The variability, that makes a good variability, that word, but it can make it tricky when it comes to things like goals, because goals will ask for certain types of things. If you don't see them, you can't get them.
Yep. That is completely true. And also cards that trigger off of what other players do. This is a player interaction issue. Well, there's only two players. And so if you have a bird that triggers off of a certain kind of bird, or when a person does a certain kind of action and the other player doesn't do that, then yours is never going to, give you a return on what you invested in it.
Yeah, it's just, it has a very narrow shape when it comes to the abilities and player interactions for specifically two players. It actually relies on more players at the table for those to kind of balance out with an ability that says always triggers when this situation happens, and this situation is always happening because it's in the right spot, and that sort of thing.
Yep. But I believe that's it for the issues that we saw in a two-player game. So let's move on to what it does well, which is kind of everything else.
Yes, it has a very streamlined, smooth play style. You just take your turn, choose one of four options, go down the list of anything that you have in that action slot space, because that's essentially what the habitats are, is slot spaces, and the birds pump those up. It's super slick.
Yeah. It's mostly multiplayer solitaire, which we put in the good category because we tend to like those kind of games where we can just compete at our own pace and then compare at the end. Now, you do fight over food because it's a shared pool that you draft from. Same with the cards in the row and the end of round goals. But with the end of round goals, there's two ways to play it, where either you are competing and so there is a first place and second place and so on points, or you can just play it where you gain points for however many you accomplish, and so does everybody else. So if it wants birds with a bowl nest and you get 3 and another person gets 4, well, you've got 3 points, they've got 4 points. And so that makes it independent of what each other is doing. So like I said, we tend to prefer it multiplayer solitaire, but other people may not. So that is something to take a look at.
Yeah. Accessibility?
Yep, on to accessibility. So what was one of the challenges that you faced?
So the first challenge I faced is one of the abilities is called when activated. Now, all the abilities are color-coded so that you can easily look down at your tableau that you've built and see when they trigger. So for me, the brown with black text is just very poor contrast.
Yeah.
I could still make it out with my assistive technology, and I'm pretty sure most people, even with colorblind issues, could read through it. It was poor contrast. I was hoping that they would have done tan.
Yeah, something lighter.
If they wanted to keep it brown, or maybe white text,
right,
since it is a brown and it was kind of a dark color. That was the biggest contrast color type issue I've had.
Yeah, and I could see people who are playing a game in low light might also have trouble reading that black text on brown. Again, not that it's impossible, just that it can be challenging because it's not highly contrasted. So hopefully at some point, maybe if they do a reprint, they can, if they watch this, they can make it a better contrast.
Yeah, or at least think about it.
Yep.
Next issue is the resources. The resources are all round, so if you rely on shape to tell them apart, like I do, you might actually need to upgrade and deluxify your components, which we did. So, in fact, now that we have done that, I actually handle all the resources.
Yeah.
Because I can tell all the shapes apart just by feeling them.
Right.
Fortunately, the icons are all very straightforward, very simple, easy to see, so I don't think a colorblind issue will come into play.
Right.
And that's completely unnecessary for many players. But if you're interested in it, there's plenty of people on Etsy that makes these custom components, as well as MeepleSource, which does the official Wingspan.
And you can do even other things where, for the most part, the cubes for each player are fine because they stay on your board, other than going on the end of round goals. But we upgraded to little bird houses. There are some people on Etsy who've done differently shaped birds, so each player color gets their own shape of birds. It's really how you would want to deluxify it and make it more interesting tactile wise. I will have to say that for me, it does enhance the game, even though it's not necessary.
Oh, I have fun playing with little bird houses.
It can really enhance the game.
Yeah.
So on to other accessibility challenges. Your hand of cards is kept secret.
Yes. So if you have vision problems, you will need to have an assistive technology to enlarge it, like I do. That does mean that if we play in one room, I am running to the other room to enlarge, reading my cards, running back. So I get a good workout. So Wingspan's a good workout.
I don't think that would be for most people, but...
beyond that, though, most of the components are open. So the tableau you build, the cards out in the row, all open information. So someone at the table can help, like you do.
Yes, exactly. And the only other challenge probably is going to be for most people, but also for those who have mobility challenges, will be shuffling that deck of 171 cards. We have two different card shufflers. We normally just use the manual one because we don't want to damage the cards. There's a slight chance they get stuck, and with the motorized one, that gets stuck, it could be damaging. But we had to use the motorized one for this because it's just so many cards, because it holds, what, you said 4 decks of poker cards?
At least 4 decks.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what you need. So if you're going to use a card shuffler to solve that sort of problem, you're going to need a big one.
Yes.
Hopefully you already got one, because, I mean, you have problems with your hands that card shufflers just are a nice way to work around that issue. But it even becomes an issue for those people that don't have hand problems. It's just a lot of cards to shuffle, and that only expands with expansions.
Right.
Which we'll talk about later.
Yes. And you might want to consider getting a card holder, because you do get a lot of cards. You play a lot of cards. And so I know for me, I put my hand of cards down on the table all the time. So that might be something to look into.
Yeah.
Well, I think we actually already covered the stuff it does right, which is the iconography. It's unique, distinct, and a lot of the game is open information other than the cards you have secretly in your hand, and your goal card would be kept secret. Everything else, once it's out on the table, does stay open information.
Yes. So, 2-player game. Is this worth?
I say yes. Even with the knowledge that you will not see a wide variety of the cards in the game, and it might get slightly frustrating on the goal cards. In our review video, we'll talk about ways that I wouldn't say work around the goal cards, but reframe our thinking about the goal cards, and how to, maybe just not go for birds that would require player interaction if you're playing at a 2-player count. So I still say yes, it's good for 2 players.
Yeah, at first I was a little bit kind of on the fence as to whether or not I would say it's a good for 2 players, but then I had to retrain my thinking of how the game is, which I'm going to cover in the review.
Yeah.
But now that I have gone through that mental shift, I'd say definitely it is a good two-player game. It's just you have to come at it with the right mindset.
Yes.
Which we'll cover in the review.
Right. Otherwise, for those with accessibility challenges, would you recommend it?
Yes, there are a few issues, but I'd say they're minor for the most part. And the ones that are probably a little bit more substantial, there are plenty of ways to work around it. Card shuffling, upgrading your components, that sort of thing.
Yep, I agree.
So that'll do it for us here at Rolling with Two. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can reach us on any of the social media platforms at
Rolling with Two, that's TWO. We're on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and on YouTube. Please like and subscribe.
And why would you ever roll with just one when you could be rolling with two?